Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. I'm Adam Posen, the Institute's president, and it's our privilege today to host a meeting with the Asian Development Bank at which Dr. Yasuyuki Sawada will present the latest regional integration report, and in particular, the work they've been doing on global value chains and supply integration after the COVID pandemic. The Asian Economic Integration Report is one of the ADB's flagship publications, and we are very pleased when we can bring together with one of the major international financial institutions a focused look at their research. Today, the presenter, Dr. Sawada, is well known to many of you. He has been the chief economist of the Asian Development Bank since November 2016 and is the chief spokesperson for the ADB on economic and development trends. Previously, he was a professor in the Faculty of Economics, at the University of Tokyo in Japan. He had previously worked at the ADB Institute in Tokyo and been a consultant to the World Bank. He's a well-known development economist with a PhD from Stanford University and many publications prior to his taking over as the ADB chief economist. Thank you for joining us today, Yasuyuki, and please, let me turn it over to you for your presentation.
Yes, let me upload my slide. I hope you can see the slide.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Adam, for a very nice warm introduction. And thank you very much for having me today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So today, I'd like to share with you Asian Economic Integration Report 2021, or in short, AEIR 2021. This is one of the ADB's flagship publications we just released a couple of weeks ago. And this report examines how the reconfiguration of supply chains will reshape global trade landscape after COVID-19, and also how different foreign direct investment policies can affect the cross-border investment flows. Also, we look into regional cooperation and integration and trade relationship and how economies can recover and reconnect after the pandemic ends. So this is the today's presentation. So first, I'd like to share a broader picture of regional integration before COVID-19. These are intra-regional share of each domain, trade, FDI, equity, debt, migration, and also tourism. Comparing year 2001 figure and just before pandemic 2019 figure. So these are the number, intra-regional share out of total share. Before the outbreak of pandemic, Asia's regional integration has progressed steadily in the area of trade, FDI, finance, and also tourism, as you can see. Migration, second from the right, migration is tilted downward non-Asian destination slightly over 2 decades, but overall we can observe a progress of regional integration. So to capture this overall regional integration picture more systematically and closely, we construct Asia Pacific Regional Cooperation Integration Index, or in short, RG Index. This is a multidimensional index tracking progress on set of 6 relevant dimensions of regional integration. As you can see from our right end, trade and investment, money and finance, etc., 6 domains. And latest arch estimates indicate left. Regional integration Asia rose slightly in year 2018, due mainly to the rebound of the money and finance dimension. Convergence of interest rate and the recovery in cross-border liability in some Asian economies between 2017 and 2018 partly explain this improvement in year 2018. Regional integration Asia increased for most sub-regions in 2018, as you can see from left. South Asia on the top light blue in the left chart leads the regional integration. likely driven by policy efforts on trade and investment, infrastructure, connectivity, and movement people. Second, dark blue from the top on the left chart, which is East Asia, high regional integration we observe, slightly retreated in year 2018, partly due to weakened FDI and supply chain linkages within Asia, which affects the East Asia relatively more. Green colored left chart, again, South Asia contribution to regional integration in 2018 increased with initiatives promoting energy trade and enhancing multimodal transport network posit to bring benefits for RCI to this regional integration, regional cooperation integration to this sub-region. Central Asia, bottom in the left chart, those started from a relatively low level. Central Asia has made a strong progress in regional integration in recent years, improving, for example, port capacity, addressing connectivity gaps, trade linkages, and boosting people's mobility remain important for Central Asia. Sub-regional results across dimensions not shown here remain wide-ranging, and East Asia and Southeast Asia outperforming other regions across most dimensions. Overall, as we observe from the right panel, contribution movement of people, dark blue, second from the bottom, infrastructure and connectivity, orange parts, and trade and investment, light blue on the top, as well as the regional value chain, gray component of the right chart, continue to drive regional integration in Asia and Pacific. So these are the broad picture before COVID-19. And we can use this Archie index to capture some spatial, across the space distribution. Our spatial autocorrelation analysis of Archie index suggests regional integration efforts in neighboring countries can create synergies across the borders. There are positive spillovers in regional integration for any economy when neighboring countries have high regional integration. We observe this pattern here. Dots present the Archie score, this consolidated 6-domain aggregated regional cooperation score of each country. The larger the dot, higher the Archie score, higher level of regional integration. We observe here some clustering of large dots in Southeast Asia. So this indicates an economy's geographic location can play an important role on its ability to forge linkages with other economies in the region. Cross-border spillovers may not occur in clusters of low regional integration areas. In particular, geographically disadvantaged economies, such as the landlocked countries. In this picture, Central Asia, we see dots small and sparse. So we see low regional integration. But on the other hand, and also Pacific Island economies, although we don't have Archie index for many countries in Pacific, but Fiji, this dot size is small. So again, level of regional integration, inter-regional integration is less. So this is sea-locked countries without access to the, the sea-locked countries show a greater risk of marginalization, and the remoteness from large markets and vulnerability of economic and natural shocks. We can, infer from this pattern. So in any case, we see a big cluster in Southeast Asia, and then low-level integration in Central and the Pacific region. So it really provide spatial spillover seems to be playing a role in regional cooperation and integration. But anyway, again, this is before COVID-19 situation. So now let's switch a gear and let's look at COVID-19. So this is the figure summarizing COVID-19 situation. Since it was reported in December 2019, not to mention, COVID-19 has infected more than 100 million people and also claimed lives of more than 2 million people around the globe. The virus spread rapidly across the national border, shutting down or affecting almost all spheres of human activities. In Asia, containment measures have gradually eased in October and November after the April peak, but measures tightened again in December 2020. So left chart is a consolidated government's stringency index based on Oxford University's stringency index, which is aggregated index of stringency of containment, like school opening, school closure, workplace closure, social distancing, etc., etc. So left chart, we can see peak of stringency around April and May, and then relax continuously October, November. Then again, December and January, we observe somewhat strengthened stringency. COVID-19 and stringent containment measure naturally severely disrupted Asia's cross-border flows and activities 2020. Border closures, lockdowns, quarantines, and other measures to control virus spread disrupted supply chains, weakened demand, and intensified uncertainties. These resulted in an overall decline in global trade, dropping cross-border investment, reversal of foreign portfolio financial flows at the onset of pandemic, and tighter travel restrictions, as you can see from the right chart showing the cargo flows and the passenger movement data. Consequently, ADB estimated developing Asia contracted in 2020 for the first time for developing Asia in last 6 decades. And last year's growth, we estimated overall developing Asia's growth rate, we estimated minus 0.2%. So this is the first time contraction of Asia, developing Asian economy in last 6 decades. In this report, AIR 2021, we have a theme chapter titled Making Digital Platform Work for Asian Pacific. Amid global pandemic, many Asian economies have leveraged better infrastructure and technology to allow for faster and cheaper domestic and cross-border connections. New technology, digitalization, and service trade can connect global economies even closer and provide new challenges of global linkages. The ongoing pandemic also highlights contribution of digital services in enabling economic activities such as e-health, online education, telework, and online meetings like us, and also despite containment measures. COVID-19 pandemic provides an opportunity for greater global and regional cooperation potentially, specifically in the areas listed here. First, contain and suppressing the virus. Secondly, strengthening global and regional supply chain. And thirdly, increasing resilience to natural hazard and health risks. So these issues are highlighted in this report. So now let me talk about supply chain investment for COVID-19, post-COVID-19. So now let's closely look at the impact of COVID-19 and possible recovery. First, Asia's trade growth plummeted in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic due to widespread border closures, trade restrictions, and stricter quarantine procedures. After hitting the bottom in May 2020, however, Asia's export started to rebound quite strongly as global demand on medical supplies and equipment, as well as electronic goods surge. Top left shows the Asia and global rebound of exports. Asia's import, top right is import, Asia and global. Asian import also started to grow again, led by increasing industrial production in manufacturing sector of the PRC and other countries. High-frequency indicators such as global shipping and packaging indexes and the port calls, right bottom chart, summarizing high-frequency number, weekly number, and the recent mobility trade data, left bottom, both high-frequency information, suggests Asia's trade growth could recover faster than anticipated after the drop in April, May last year. However, persistent pandemic and risk of a double-dip recession around the globe could still weigh on the sustained recovery of Asian trade growth. Global Asia trade landscape in the post-pandemic is expected to characterized by three main driving forces listed here. Number one, momentum of globalization likely to be revisited by many countries. We think globalization will continue to progress, but may do so in a different shape. Secondly, supply chains are expected to undergo significant reconfiguration, as I mentioned before, to minimize the risk from disruptions. It could take the form of regionalization, reshoring. I will talk about reshoring later, diversification of supply chain. Third, pandemic has accelerated digitalization of economies, as I also briefly mentioned before. Digitalization will continue post-pandemic, and cross-border trade transaction will become increasingly dependent upon digital tools and real-time data. In addition, behind the border bottlenecks and non-tariff measures, I will explain this, remain crucial issues to tackle in shoring up trade growth. I will show some data later on. So estimated impact of supply chain reshoring on trade. Even before the pandemic, reshoring of supply chain have been happening partly due to technological developments and so-called fourth industrial revolution penetrating Asia. As countries move up the technological ladder, some parts of the supply chain which have been outsourced could insourced for domestic production. In addition, robots and automation enables more reshoring to be available by making the cheap labor cost overseas less important in production. Pandemic could accelerate this trend by alerting many countries on fragility of supply chain of key products. Country could use reshoring as a means to transfer production back home. There are two channels in supply chain. One is backward linkages. Production of intermediate imports could be reshored. And in the forward linkage, exporter also can reshore production goods, which used to be outsourced to the foreign economies. So both backward linkage and forward linkage, if reshoring happen, then that will propagate through a supply chain network. Success of a reshoring strategy rely on export countries' capacity to substitute for its reduction of imported intermediate goods and outsourced production. So it's basically a domestic production capacity matters whether reshoring can be possible or not. Anyway, these are the concepts of how reshoring may happen, and that will undermine overall trade relationship. We can quantify likely impact using ADB's multi-regional input-output table, international input-output table, to trace a whole supply chain network. So we did a simulation exercise, and according to our simulation, global trade will contract by 13 to 22% if 10 to 20% of global supply chains be reshored to home country through backward and forward linkages. Actually, detailed analysis can be found in the report. But I may say roughly, reshoring of backward and forward linkages for each sector. So it's not necessarily a big, reshoring itself. However, if combined through a supply chain network, that can generate quite a sizable impact overall drop of trade. So now let me talk about the FDI. This is another important dimension of regional integration. FDI performance up to Q3 of 2020 attests to the validity of gloomy prospect of FDI inflow both globally and into Asia. Left-hand side chart, Asia's FDI inflow is shown in darker bars. Each bar has a darker bottom, that's Asia, and the lighter one is the rest of the world. And we have green field FDI, which is shown in the green, and the brown field is shown in yellow and brown. So we can see what's the impact of COVID-19 up until Q3 last year. Although greenfield investments, darker part remain tepid, we see a quite robust recovery in M&A in Q2 and Q3 in Asia, possibly on a bargain hunting. Actual number, right table shows the actual number, greenfield FDI and brownfield M&As FDI last year, Q1, Q2, Q3. And as we can see from this right-hand table, cross-border M&A deals in Asia amounted to 58 billion in Q2 2020 and 42.8 billion in Q3. So due to this is attributed to a higher investment in communications and electronic components, among others. So we see some rebound of brownfield FDI, but not necessarily in a greenfield FDI. Other trade dimensions, non-tariff measures on the rise. So number of non-tariff measures imposed in Asia increased substantially over the years, even before the pandemic, but it seems to be a trend continued. In areas of anti-dumping, left chart is a number of a total number of non-tariff measures imposed in Asia, and the left chart, dark blue in the middle, which is anti-dumping. It's increasing, and light green left chart again. Second from the bottom is safeguard measures. It's also slightly increasing, but especially left chart top, light blue. That's a sanitary and a phytosanitary measures. That's increasing, and also technical barriers on trade. Dark green, a second one from the top, also increasing. So we observe this increasing trend of non-tariff measures. On the trade facilitation front, right chart, UN ESCAP 2019 global survey shows significant progress made towards streamlining trade procedures in the region. This is data, pre-COVID-19 data, but the implementation of trade facilitation seems to vary across a group of measures. Cross-border paperless trade measures put in shaded, blue shaded area, cross-border paperless trade in the middle. Actually, this includes the electronic exchange of certificates of origin or sanitary or phytosanitary certificates. We observe these have been initiated in less than 40% of the economies of the region, often only a pilot basis, not a regular basis. So low average implementation rate for small and medium-sized enterprises. So right end, we listed the different areas: small and medium-sized enterprises, women-owned firms, and trade finance facilitation. So these trade facilitation implementation areas, we see overall low average rates. And very few countries have customized trade facilitation measures in this area. So now let me continue to talk about FDI. Together with trade, foreign direct investment could play a pivotal role in post-COVID-19 Asia's recovery. Asia has traditionally imposed, having said this, Asia has been imposing traditionally higher restrictions to FDI than industrialized economies, as you can see from left chart. Particularly in tertiary sector, service sector. These have been implemented through higher falling equity limitations, adding a screening mechanism and other operational restrictions. So we see also COVID-19 brought a new surge in investment policy measures, reinforcing restrictions or regulations in Asian Pacific for FDI, as you can see from the left chart. On the other hand, measures toward improving investment facilitation in Asia remain sluggish, as you can see from the right chart. Large variation within the region, we also observe. These investment facilitation measures include, for example, strengthening of investment promotion agencies, adoption of investor-friendly protocols to improve transparency and accountability, etc., etc. So we can observe this is somewhat remain sluggish. And so I think we can say a region can do more to adopt and render more flexible investment policy framework. Policy measures adopted last year to reduce administrative burden during the pandemic includes, for example, in China and Thailand, and strengthening a partnership with domestic and foreign investors seems to be quite important. So embracing evolution of a digital trade. So this is from our theme chapter on digital platform. Left-hand chart shows digital channels for selling increasingly important as B2B companies adapt to change customer habits. We can notice a decrease in in-person interaction, B2B in-person interaction in blue, but towards a more remote model of sales after the break of COVID-19. Sorry, this is B2B numbers before and after COVID. And the in-person is shown in the left end. So I think we can observe in-person B2B transaction decrease, but online and the e-commerce transaction increased during the COVID-19. And this is based on only April 2020 McKinsey Pulse survey from 3,600 decision makers. But still, very early stage of COVID-19, we see this quick switch from in-person transaction to digital transaction. So there are, we listed here in according to our theme chapter and wide variety of different analysis of digital economy, 5 key reforms areas is critical to unlock potential of digital trade. First is to invest digital infrastructure and connectivity to broaden physical access to mobile and internet networks. Especially digital not only expand the business and people's livelihood and well-being, but also there are risk of a digital divide. Those who can tap on digital technology and those who are lagging behind. So I think first component, affordable infrastructure and connectivity, that's a really critical, necessary condition to wisely avoid the digital divide. Secondly, we need to invest in logistics and delivery infrastructure, including application of digital solution in customs and border procedure. And the third, governments needs to intensify regional efforts to modernize and harmonize regulation on illegal activities such as cyber crimes, money laundering, and tax evasion, especially with increasing cross-border digital transactions. It's critically important to strengthen international tax cooperation harmonization to plug loopholes and properly capture profits generated by digital economy. BEPS issues quite getting important. And indeed, ADB announced to setting up a regional tax hub. And our president, Masatsugu Asakawa, who came and joined ADB last year, has been emphasizing tax cooperation and also domestic resource mobilization. So I think this is the issue, also important in the regional cooperation arena. Number 4 is necessity to enhance the digitally enabled financial services and payment options to facilitate digital transaction support the digital economy. Of course, when you transact and you purchase goods and services, you have to settle the bill. And so in order to facilitate the whole process, I think financial arena, digitalization is a really indispensable component. Lastly, but not least, policymakers should undertake a legal, regulatory, and institutional reforms to improve our ecosystem for digital economy. Flexible approach is quite important, I think, when setting policies and regulations. They need to work together with the private sector to build open and innovative ecosystems for platform businesses. All while ensuring adequate legislation or regulations for data privacy, consumer protection, and cybersecurity. And also, I'd like to add, on one hand, facilitating digital platform economic transaction, that may strengthen monopolistic behavior of platformers. So I think a competition policy, fair competition policy, is also critical. In addition to data security and cyber security, consumer protection issues. So now I'd like to briefly mention about the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. RCEP was signed last year, November 15, by members of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as well as Australia, Japan, New Zealand, People's Republic of China, and Republic of Korea. So ASEAN and 5 countries. This is the largest free trade agreement in human history, I can say, I think, involving about 30% of global GDP, and also a same proportion, 30% of roughly of global world population. And it combines existing bilateral agreements between ASEAN members and each of the 5 major trading partners. So I think this is a really mega arrangement. RCEP can potentially benefit. Also, I'd like to emphasize not only Asia but also the rest of the world can benefit out of RCEP, as you can see from right chart, which is based on simulation analysis. RCEP will be an important stepping stone, I believe, towards the open integrated economic system in Asian Pacific and also in the world. RCEP could further promote trade in the region by strengthening regional production networks through greater harmonization, regulation, and policies across members. Common rules of origin under RCEP will likewise reduce export costs within its membership. Asia needs to embrace stronger trade liberalization and facilitation efforts, which includes pursuing trade arrangements, in particular regional and mega trade deals such as RCEP. So now, related to FDI, coming back to FDI related issues again, improving investment treaty regimes are also important in post-COVID agenda. Asia's network of investment agreement has regained importance in the wake of COVID-19 as they safeguard the economic interest of both states and investors. Design and negotiation of investment agreement is often highly complex, but we use new approaches to compare their design structures and economic impacts to assess the efficiency of each provision and its economic impact. This is still a bit preliminary result, but we included in AEIR report. ADB's most recent analysis using a unique BIT data, bilateral investment treaty data. So we have been compiling bilateral investment treaty data in last few years, and we use this to analyze FDI inflow and based on the gravity type of modeling. Enforcement of certain investment provisions such as accession to arbitration, national treatment, admission versus establishment provisions. These type of investment provisions have been more effective in attracting higher FDI flows in Asia, particularly in greenfield investment. Right chart or right table summarizes regression result in some icon by icon, and the blue shows the statistically significant according to the regression analysis, and these positive effects are shown in the blue, dark blue on the right end. And different area and different provision, we see a greenfield FDI seems to be facilitated. So investment provision might be better designed and negotiated to accommodate investment conditions and requirement between origins and recipient countries, so that in the aftermath of COVID-19, FDI can inflow more seamlessly. The reason why we brought up this issue, and particularly I emphasize in this report and today's presentation, is globally there is a fear COVID-19 crisis could trigger upsurge of investor states dispute because COVID crisis has increased the tensions and interruptions in global businesses. So we thought that look into bilateral investment treaties and some regulatory framework between states and investors play a key role to revive investment, foreign direct investment, especially in greenfield investment. Anyway, for this reason, modernizing investment provisions in current and future investment agreement seems to be quite critical. For example, COVID crisis underscores how important it is for states to maintain degree of flexibility with regard to some provisions, including national treatment or expropriation, so that regulatory measures for public interest can be taken in exceptional circumstances. In this chart, board shows each provisions, and under the board, we show the in regular font explaining what can be done better. So important effort for improving government capacity on investment policy is quite needed. A balance between policy measures that prioritize national interest and other development goals while ensuring treaty compliance will be quite critical for reviving, especially greenfield FDI. And we have some data analysis based on our unique BIT, bilateral investment treaty data. So let me summarize my presentation and also some punchline of AEIR 2021. First, Asia's trade growth decelerated early 2020. The sign of robust recovery emerged recently as reflected in both the monthly export and import and high-frequency data as we observe. However, reconfiguration of supply chain will continue to pose challenges through backward and forward supply chain linkages. Secondly, emphasis on non-tariff measures and digitalization can reduce behind-the-border bottlenecks, improve trade logistics and efficiency, promote digital trade in goods and services, leading to a more robust recovery. And also, I touch upon RCEP. RCEP can help regions' pandemic response by building trade and economic resilience through more open economic system, which is a stepping stone for more open, not only Asian economy, but the global economy. FDI is estimated to have declined significantly in 2020, but M&A flows of brownfield FDI Q2 and Q3 show early signs of recovery. And also, pandemic caused major interruptions in global business. And there is a fear, as I mentioned, COVID-19 crisis may trigger increase in investor-state disputes. So Asia should improve investment climate and leverage investment treaties to attract investment. So that I think that's a very important policy implication. Finally, but not least, in order to seize the potential of ongoing, very rapid digital transformation, the region needs to address varying e-readiness and narrow digital divide. On one hand, maximizing benefit of platform transaction and economy. But at the same time, I think the government should put special care on possibility of expanded digital divide. So these are the key messages of the report of my presentation. With that, I'd like to stop here for my initial presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sawada. If we can take your slides off the screen. Yes. We are very fortunate to have had this vision from you and your colleagues, the Asian Development Bank. And in particular, I want to commend you and your team for emphasizing the multidimensional aspect of globalization, particularly the importance of cross-border investment. that this isn't just, is globalization expanding or contracting? There's a more complicated picture, and it doesn't all necessarily go together, although, as you indicate, in a good way, there could be reinforcing aspects of investment and trade and facilitation. I would encourage members of our audience, some have already, to use the Q&A function on Zoom. Registered members of our audience can submit questions over that facility. Before we get to that, I will start posing some of the audience questions, but let me, if I could, just start with a particular question. You showed the chart with the overlapping RCEP and CPTPP and the differing estimates of benefits for the region and for other regions. Could you say a bit more about how you got those numbers? I don't mean technically, but just broadly speaking, what are the assumptions behind those numbers? And in particular, how might regionalization of supply chains increase or decrease the gains from RCEP or CPTPP?
Thank you very much. So this is based on Peter Patry and Michael Premer's analysis. And actually, right now I don't have, this is based on a GTAP model. So I don't have how supply chain network will be affected by CPTPP and RCEP. But I think overall supply chain spillover will be positive, not only within Asia, but also Asia and non-Asia, so that we can generate overall benefit out of RCEP and CTPP. So I think, is that respond to your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Now turning to the audience questions, Yuan Wu has asked about the data measuring Trans-Pacific regional integration, particularly Eastern Pacific, but in particular he asks about India. And India, of course, has withdrawn from RCEP. So could you say a bit more about what you see as the prospects for India in terms of its integration policy and how it fits in or doesn't fit in with the broader trends you talked about in this report?
So we have this RCI index, not only for Asian Pacific, but also other regions around the globe. While we have a data to track Trans-Pacific regional integration, like APEC, what's the intra-APEC regional integration, we have a data to construct such a index, APEC, intra-APEC regional integration, but we didn't do that exercise. So probably, if you are interested, you can contact me, and we can provide some tentative analysis. I think India and RCEP, of course, other RCEP members still welcoming India if India can come back to RCEP. But I think withdrawal from RCEP, as I showed, RCEP generates a positive impact on the Asian economy overall, and country by country impact we don't show here, but of course withdrawal from RCEP, India's positive RCEP impact will be slightly mitigated, and but still India can gain from RCEP because of a substantial spillover effect from the Asia getting together and generate better trade relationships. So I think there is still a positive impact on India.
Thank you, Yasuyuki. Following up in the similar region or spirit, Anne-Marie Golda asks, what do you see as the special challenges for South Asia where regional integration lags substantially most other regions? And I would just note that we at Peterson have been addressing some of these issues in a multi-author project on India's outward orientation that we'll be promoting further soon. But let's get your views, the views of the ADB on that. It seems regional integration, has been lagging in South Asia, as Anne-Marie Golden notes. So how do you see that? And then Annabelle Gonzalez asks, there are prospects for Pakistan to join RCEP.
South Asia, as I showed in Archie Index, South Asia has been a relatively low level of overall, low level of index. And I think, let me, actually in the report, we have a sub-categorical integration. So I think if, for more granular, status of integration, as I mentioned, in 6 domains: trade and investment, money and finance, regional value chain, infrastructure connectivity, movement of people, institutional social integration. I think South Asia overall has been lagging behind from East Asia and Southeast Asia. And particularly, I think there is a room for infrastructure and connectivity arena and regional value chain. I think there is a scope for South Asia to facilitate. And what's the Pakistan's prospect joining RCEP? Actually, at this stage, it's not necessarily certain. So, but again, if Pakistan can join RCEP, I think that definitely can be an important stepping stone towards bigger free trade arrangement. And I think that will be a very important stepping stone for RCEP to gain further benefit of regional integration and cooperation.
Thank you. Shifting a bit from RCEP, KG Inoue asks, how much evidence of reshoring do you see happening in the region? You mentioned that as part of the development, some redundancy in supply chain, some reshoring in response to COVID. You didn't really quantify it much. It may not be possible to quantify, but can you expand a bit on details on what you're seeing in terms of reshoring?
Yes, we have data about global value chain. And also a few indicators. In the report, we show a trend of reshoring before pre-COVID-19 situation, because 2020 data, 2019 data, we are still waiting for. But actually, looking at this GVC index, we see GVC participation level has been slightly deteriorating. And also level of complicated GVCs remain low. And past several years, we see this trend of reshoring. And I think this can be, as I mentioned in my talk, this can be attributed to technological advancement, usage of robots and automation. And this makes basically outsourcing to other countries and changing outsourcing to a more outsourcing is looking for a cheaper labor and production, but robots and automation progress and price of these robots are decreasing, then outsourcing getting less attractive. So I think this is one thing why we observe this. And also, Asia is basically a middle-income country, and from a lower segment of middle-income country to upper segment of middle-income countries, most of the Asian countries are now moving upward. And because this moving up development ladder, naturally they can internalize part of the value change. So I think this is like a medium-term and long-term trend fostering reshoring. And so actually, we have a data showing in the report about this reshoring trend even before COVID-19.
Great, thank you. A number of our audience members have asked questions about China's role, and in particular, how China is or isn't following a transparent rules-based order, and how much China's own reshoring is keeping R&D at home and only investing lower value added abroad. Now, I'm not going to ask you to pronounce entirely on China, but could you give a sense from your and your team's ongoing work how you see China in terms of quality of trade agreements, transparency, and high value added or not investing in the region?
Actually, country-specific data we don't necessarily analyze and show in the report. But as for the China, one thing I can mention is, again, even before COVID-19, there is a surge in FDI of China to Southeast Asian countries. And this has been driven, especially between 2019 to 2018, if I remember correctly, FDI from China to other Asian country doubled. And this can be, and also in terms of sectors, it was not necessarily a low-end labor-intensive sector, but rather capital-intensive electronics products and other related sector. So I think, and also, as you can guess, this was our interpretation is this was driven by U.S.-China trade tension, and because of this, FDI flow into China from China to Southeast Asia, so that the trade exporting activities can be shifted from China to non-Chinese, ASEAN countries mainly. And also at the same time, by the way, we also observe some, somewhat substantial increase in FDI from US to Southeast Asian countries. So I think this trend we observe, and it was not necessarily a low-end labor-intensive sector.
Great, thank you. Anirudh Shingal asks about the recent data on services trade for the countries covered in the report. And my colleagues at Peterson, Annabelle Gonzalez and Brad Jensen, have both raised this issue as services trade, of course, having fallen off hugely in the pandemic, but having been a potential major source of growth. Services trade is also often seen as something where it's the US and Europeans exporting and other countries not as much. How do you see services trade developing in the region at present?
I think digital transformation triggered by COVID-19 actually seems to accelerate service trade within a region. And also, I would say this is a part of a third unbundling, if we apply a terminology of Robert Baldwin's, Professor Baldwin's terminology. And I think this trend seems to be accelerating. But I think 2020 data, we are still waiting. And indeed, ASEAN Economic Integration report next year, 1 year later, we will have theme chapter on digitalization and service trade. So I think a year later, I can give you hopefully full picture what's if service trade and service sector affected by COVID-19.
Terrific. Well, on that note, Professor Sawada, we will close the session with anticipation of the future work that you and your colleagues at the Asian Development Bank will be doing, including the Asian Development Bank Institute, of course. And we look forward to having you back, I hope, to talk about next year's report or other targeted research from your colleagues. Thanks to everyone who joined us. Of course, Professor Sawada's slides and a recording of this event are available on the Peterson Institute website, along with a link to the ADB and the ADB's publication of this flagship report on regional economic integration.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the very stimulating questions and comments. And thank you very much, Adam, for chairing the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasuyuki. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.